March 25th. Fire.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right.
Sorry, Chair Stedman, we just started.
All right, okay. I was just rehearsing. So, all right. Well, let's call to order the March 25th Fire and Police Commission special meeting. And we'll start that by doing a roll call. So, Carol, would you like to do the roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Stedman?
Here.
Vice Chair Rodriguez?
Here.
Commissioner Allman?
You could just wave, John.
Okay. Commissioner Peck?
Here.
And Commissioner Travis Teague?
Here.
Great.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Carol. All right, moving right on to the next item. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Oh, Commissioner Chair Stedman, excuse me. I think there was a request that item 13, Barbara Anderson with SB Act, be allowed to speak earlier in the meeting.
Right. Yeah, that's from, hi, Chief. How are you?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for considering this. Ms. Anderson was nice enough to agree to come up here before the commission today.
Yeah, let's accommodate her with that. I don't think there will be any objections, except that we do need to place her definitely after the police chief recruitment item, because Administrator Casey's got to bug out. He has a hard stop at 4:30. So if that's okay with you, Chief, but we'll move her up in order. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for considering.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Any other changes? All right. All right. Moving along swimmingly here. And Commissioner Peck, if you want to debrief on the session prior to this meeting, we'll be happy to provide you that, after we conclude today. Okay. So.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Now let's move on to, since there are no changes, let's move on to item number 5, which is approval of the meeting minutes of February 25th, 2021. Do we have a motion to approve them?
I approve the minutes of February 25, 2021.
Excellent.
I
I'll
second, Vice Chair.
All right. Max is seconding it. Let's take a vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. That sounds unanimous. Okay. All right. Moving along very well. Are there any hands raised for public comment, Carol?
Yes, it does look like Miss Anna Marie Gott is has her hand raised. So Anna Marie, I will unmute you and you will have 2 minutes to speak. Looks like you are self-muted at the moment. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Commissioners, I just wanted to acknowledge a few things. One are the changes to the agenda that were made as a result of my public comments last month. I'd also like to acknowledge just the request from the chair during the meeting when I made a request and his then discussion with the commission asking if anyone else on the board wanted to make a motion regarding the specific requests that I had made. A lot of boards do not do that in the city, and I think that it's very important because when the members of the public actually attend these meetings, they often receive no response whatsoever from a board. They are just listened to and that's it. And nothing ever is actually pushed forward. So I just want to acknowledge that and really give you some kudos for that because I don't see that very often. The next issue, I don't know if you received it because I didn't realize that this meeting was starting actually at 3:30 for your other portion of the meeting. That wasn't, that individuals of the public were not able to attend, but I did actually send an email regarding item 11. So if you don't have that now, I would just appreciate if someone would forward that to you because I would like to speak on that later in the meeting. Thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing about the information in the items for fire as well as the police department regarding alcohol and homeless related issues that I'd asked about last month. Thank you.
You're quite welcome, Ms. Scott. And we did receive your email. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to review that or they can do that on the fly, but we are in possession of that. We've read that and you're welcome for the mention in the minutes of our meeting. I know I encounter a lot of people from the public who participate and I consider them to be on equal footing with us, right? We're here, trying to serve the public. So that's our number one mission. Okay, are there any other people with their hands raised, Carol?
No other hands raised at this time.
Okay, perfect. All right, we don't have any subcommittees, so we won't have any subcommittee reports. That's the next item. So,
I have a question actually on that. The items, the Community Formation Commission and then the Race and Policing Training, is that considered subcommittee or would that be old business?
It's old business to answer your last question first. It can become a subcommittee. If you would like to make a motion for that, we can formalize it. And that way you'd be inserted, or that subcommittee would be inserted into our regular agenda. Or you can, handle it during staff communications, which is what I think you mentioned at the last meeting. So that is up to you. Having a little experience serving on subcommittees, they can become, it's just another item that you need to plan in your schedule, right? And it needs to be noticed and the public is welcome. So consider that, right?
Yeah, I'm fine with it being under commissioner reports, staff communication. I'm fine with it under there.
Good call. All right. So now we can move to item number 8. And I think if Mr. Casey's around, we'll hand it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Good to see you all again. So we're here to talk about the police chief recruitment, and my main task today is to turn it over to Greg Nelson, who is with Ralph Anderson and Associates. But before I do that, let me just put a little context with you about where we are in the process. So we are in the very, very early stages of the process for recruiting for a police chief. I came and gave you a briefing a couple months ago. And so we have now, after gone through a selection process and chosen Ralph Anderson to lead the recruitment, we're back to introduce you to them and for Mr. Nelson to have a dialogue with you today about the qualities we're looking for. Police chief is a very important position for the city and for the community. And so public input and engagement up front in this process is really important and something we are stressing. Mr. Nelson will talk about that as well. Just in broad context, we're here to begin that public engagement process. You will see more of that community-wide. We'll then do the recruitment and go through the process much like we did with the fire chief selection process that you all are familiar with. I will return to you all probably in 2 or 3 months' time as we get closer to interviewing top candidates to ask that you choose most likely 2 members of your commission to serve on that interview process. So be thinking about that, but that's not agendized today. It's not what I'm looking for today. I will return to you for that. And then as we get to the conclusion, I will come to you in closed session as well and give you the recap of the selection process and hopefully get your concurrence on a new police chief once we wrap that all up. But at this point, I will turn it over to Mr. Nelson. I do need to step off at 4:30, but by all means, keep going forward with Mr. Nelson. There's no reason for you to stop your deliberations on this just because I have to get to another meeting at 4:30. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Much appreciated. Mr. Nelson, happy to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. And Paul, thank you for the comments and the introduction. I'm looking forward to working with the city of Santa Barbara on this very, very important and highly visible position for the city. We are in some ways going to approach the search in a similar manner as we've done for the fire chief recruitment, but I would say with a heightened amount of community involvement and public engagement throughout the search. And it's just, you almost can't do enough of that in a police chief recruitment. It's just so important to engage all of the community and really get a significant amount of input into the process. I'll very briefly touch upon the steps ahead, but I'm mainly here today to listen, to get your input as the Fire and Police Commission into the challenges and opportunities ahead for the next chief, as well as what traits or qualities you believe would lend themselves to success in Santa Barbara. So as Administrator Casey said, we're just beginning the search right now, and we're beginning it in a pretty inclusive way. This is our first formal meeting in the process. We'll be meeting with many other stakeholders across community, across the police department, and across the city organization. And we're also going to be holding an online survey to allow anyone from the community to be able to provide input into the candidate profile. We'll spend about the next 3 weeks developing a candidate profile, which really is going to aim to refine those qualities and characteristics of what we're looking for in the position. And with that, we'll set about recruiting. We'll spend about 6 weeks out in the market recruiting. And we'll, at the end of that period, we'll be doing a lot of screening and vetting of candidates. And a few weeks after that, we'll be meeting with Mr. Casey and his team to identify a group of candidates to bring through the interview and selection process. And again, we're going to engage community, the city organization, and police department in the selection process as well. And so that'll be a few months out, but right now it's time to listen. I'll entertain any questions you may have on the process, but I have just a couple of big open-ended questions to ask you afterward.
I have one quick question. I know that this Fire and Police Commission will have plenty of input for you, but before they get started, Greg, what is your background? What are you bringing to the table?
Yeah, so
Not to
I
put you-
am a
not to put you on the spot, but
I'm
just
sorry?
not to put you on the spot, just to get some
No,
context.
no, I don't mind at all. So I am a former police chief myself. I did my first 20 years in policing, with the last 4 of those as chief. And then always planned to have a 2-chapter career, and transitioned into doing this work of recruiting police chiefs. Have been working for Ralph Anderson and Associates for 5 years now. Actually, it's 6 years now. I lead our public safety practice area and lead the majority of all of our public safety related recruitments. Also working with me on this project, although not here today, is another recent former police chief, Brian Noblet. He was recently the police chief in Elk Grove, California, and he'll be working with me very closely on this project as well.
And where do you live?
I live near Sacramento. Our office is right in the Sacramento area. I'm in that area.
Okay, so near Elk Grove.
Yes, yep, we're on opposite ends of Sacramento, but yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor. I know everyone's got questions. How about you, Vice Chair? Why don't you start out?
Sure. I'm curious. It's early in the process, so there's not really a lot of questions right now, but I'm curious about the recruitment landscape. How does that look for progressive or community-oriented policing knowledgeable chiefs, potential chiefs?
It's been an interesting time for sure. And I think we, perhaps a year ago, we saw a couple things happen at once. One, we saw over this last year, a lot of people in executive positions in the field just decided it's a good time to retire. And so there's been a lot of turnover at that top position. We feared initially that there would be a shortage in the candidate supply, that people just wouldn't be as willing to step into those roles, but we've really been encouraged to see otherwise. There is definitely absolutely change afoot, and we're seeing a lot of interest in people wanting to be part of that change and wanting to help navigate through these times. And so despite what may seem to be a very difficult recruiting environment, we've done pretty well.
And is this specific towards COP oriented chiefs or progressive policy oriented chiefs, or are you talking in general the recruitment landscape? I think Santa Barbara is.
To be honest with you, there aren't many cities that are not looking for progressive police chiefs. That's what we're all looking for right now. And so I guess that's both in one.
Well, that's great news then. Yeah.
Excellent. Max, did you want to throw some questions into the ring as our police liaison?
Like the vice chair said, being this early in the process, I'm not sure, and far be it from me to actually tell you what to do, right? You're the man for the job. So sounds like everything's moving in the right direction. I'll be curious to just hear the candidates that we have and why they think Santa Barbara would be the best spot for them to exhibit their leadership. So looking forward to that when that comes around.
Yeah, and I did want to just take an opportunity, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, to go back. I think it's probably noteworthy, and I saw Chief Malekian on the call. I'm glad to see you again. But we also have worked I said we lead our public safety practice area. That's not just police chiefs. So we had the opportunity to work with the city of Seattle on all 3 of their offices related to police oversight. And I'm currently working with King County Washington, the county surrounding Seattle, on their Office of Law Enforcement Oversight Director. So I just kind of want you to understand that we're looking at this position from a very comprehensive and a very contemporary way.
So Chief Malekian was a consultant to the city of Seattle for their oversight.
Exactly. And Chief Malekian and I had bumped into each other during one of those search engagements.
Got it. All right. So we're crossing up the connections here, building a lattice.
Correct.
Good. Very good.
I don't have a question, but more of a, I guess, statement. And I'm sure you're hearing this from every person in every department, the importance of community input, and particularly the communities that have felt negatively impacted by current police policies. There are several organizations and groups, formal and informal, who have a lot of, I think we should value their input more than probably a traditional recruitment process would accommodate. So I just encourage you to reach out to grassroots organizations, marginalized community groups, and really get information on what they see as a valuable asset and qualities for our police chief.
I absolutely commit to you, we'll be doing that. Any other questions?
Yeah. Hey, Greg, in terms of the scope of your search, so I assume it's national, but do you expect most of the candidates to be coming from the West, particularly California?
Yeah, I would say yes and yes. So it is a national search. There are some different cultural differences in policing between the Western region of the United States and the Eastern region of the United States. And so that's something to consider. And as well as, while we have had good success in placing out-of-state candidates in California, it is a little more difficult than in some other states because there's not automatic reciprocity with California Post. And so it's just one other thing to consider in the search process. So I think there'll be I don't want to go into this with a preconceived idea because this literally is our first meeting on this engagement. So, we want to listen and we want to really make that decision on where and how we recruit based on what we hear.
Can you just briefly explain to the commission what POST is, please?
Yeah, California Post is the police officer standards and training agency for the state of California, and it establishes levels and standards of training for all law enforcement officers, including police chiefs. And so every sworn peace officer in the state of California has to meet certain standards for employment and also ongoing for training. And so when someone comes into California from another state, there's not automatic reciprocity. And so there's a process involved in order to evaluate their past training in another state and making sure it's up to par with what they would have received in California.
So I know it can be a long process. So how far ahead of the actual announcement and final selection do you need to be in terms of, for timing to get the top candidates through the post process, right?
In all likelihood, from what we see commonly, it's usually only a few weeks. It's a matter of a few weeks in order to get them to where they need to be in California, but it's not automatic, and that's just a point we want to highlight. It is a process to be undertaken.
All right. Yeah, I know it's a bureaucratic process. Chief Malekian has explained it. So it sounds like a long process, careful, long process. So, which is great.
We try to do as much as we can to work with the candidate and get them aligned with posts to make sure that they're doing the things they need to do to make it go as quickly as possible.
So is it your expectation that you'll come back to us at some point in the near future to maybe update us on your progress?
Yeah, I work with Mr. Casey on the coordination of that, but certainly willing to give periodic updates as if it's in the overall recruitment plan.
Yeah, you're certainly welcome to. That's, working with the fire chief recruiter, it was pretty informal. He would just send an email and say, hey, I've got some updates, or, I'd like to talk to you, the commission about matters. So we can always get you in on the agenda.
Great, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Any other questions from the commission?
Actually, I don't have any questions because yet until I think I see the job announcement come out and see what that entails. Also, many years ago, just a quick story, we had some big issues going on in LA. Some people may remember that when we were asked, the fire guys in Santa Barbara City were asked to take PC 832. So that's something that all of us had, and we had some training and procedures minus any weapons training, but it was quite an interesting thing. But so I'm a little bit familiar with POST, but it will be interesting to see how those folks that aren't POST certified outside of California would be able to work their way in. But I'm anxious to see how it goes.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Chair
Wendy,
Sted- sorry
yes,
to
sure.
interrupt. Chair Stedman, we do have a hand raised on this item.
Okay.
And for clarification, Chair Allman, would you mind explaining what PC 832, I think was?
Well, it's probably better that Mr. Nelson explains it because it's just basic police training and arrest methods, as I remember. But it was thrown down to us because of some issues that were going on in LA and historical stuff. But we were asked to do that, and we did it. But maybe Greg, could you explain that a little bit more than I did?
Yeah, I'll just touch on it really briefly, but California Post has many categories of peace officers, all the way ranging from, the traditional police officer that might work a patrol in your city to someone that may work in different quasi law enforcement settings, such as in a more regulatory agency or in a fire department doing arson investigations and so on. And so based on the category of the peace officer, there's prescribed training to go along with that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Diane, Commissioner Travesty.
I don't have a question, just a comment, kind of a second to what Vice Chair Rodriguez stated regarding community. I would join her in seconding that community is really important, diversity, inclusion, and I'm sure all of those items will be looked at as you look at the candidates, but it is very much important for the community, I believe. And I look forward to seeing the candidates that are to come forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Carol, we can handle the public comment now.
Okay. Anna Marie, I will unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Actually, it looks like you are already unmuted. There you go.
Thank you. Commissioners, I would like to just put it out there that the city doesn't really do a lot of noticing in Spanish. And I think that any of the surveys need to be done in Spanish, that we have to go ahead and create a timeline and have that posted on the city's website and through communications about this particular process, so that the public is aware of at least a week or more in advance that there's going to be a meeting or a survey is going to be taking place. So I just want to put that out there to make sure that that actually gets done. And the other question I have is, in this process, is there a requirement that anyone who is applying for this position has to approve the release of any complaints or disciplinary actions, throughout their, law enforcement career? I don't know if that is something that happens automatically or if it is even done. And I would just like, to throw that out there, that might be a requirement. The last thing regarding a requirement is I'm a really big fan of Six Sigma. If you don't know anything about it, it started with manufacturing, and it's basically a methodology that you define a process, you measure the current, define the problem, measure the current process, analyze it, and then improve the process. And I'm just wondering if we have a requirement of using Lean Six Sigma, and that the police chief that actually is going to be selected is really focused on, effective processes and for operational cost, morale, and development, and that they use Six Sigma already. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Greg, do you want to respond to that?
I can. I think I can touch on all three of them even. So the first one, we have just finished our draft survey and have it already translated in Spanish. So there will be both an English and Spanish version of that survey out to the public, and that should open very soon. So we're definitely with you on that. And I appreciate the other suggestions as well. I'll be sure to pass them on to our counterparts in the city. As far as the background investigation goes, there is a very thorough background investigation of the person selected. And it's done in two parts. As an executive search firm, we do a very thorough background investigation of all executives, whether they're in public safety or not. It could be a city manager or a public works director or a police chief. But above and beyond that, again, California Post requires a very thorough, in-depth background investigation, which does include pulling personnel records and going through person's past history in depth. And so that is done of the person that's selected as part of the vetting process. And then lastly, I don't want to overspeak too much on this, but I as a police chief, I did go through a really good training conference on using Six Sigma and DMAIC and those other principles related to that as it applies into public service and specifically in police departments. It's still somewhat new in the industry, somewhat novel, but it is out there, and it is something that we do see more frequently than we used to.
Great. Hey, I have a quick question for Max. Max, you did your MBA at USC, correct?
Yes, sir.
So is Six Sigma still in the curriculum?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of project management techniques that they teach, right? So Six Sigma is one of them. Specifically what Anne-Marie was saying, the lean version, that's like the updated version, right? So that's the new adapted version. But you can really apply those concepts to a lot of things. It's mostly on project management. So if your project is, community engagement, you can apply those principles. If it's, I don't know, you want to increase employee retention, you can apply those principles. So it's multifaceted.
Great. Thanks for the update. Okay. Any more questions, commissioners? I guess you did a great job, Greg.
Well, I want to ask a couple of questions of you as a commission, if I have to get some input, if I could.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
All right. So as a commission, what do you believe the biggest challenges will be, or opportunities? It's usually two sides of the same coin for the next police chief.
I'm going to defer straight over to our most deeply involved community people, Diane or Lizzie. Go ahead, guys.
That's a great question. And I would think focusing on repairing harm. I think this last year has really highlighted the harms that various communities have felt at the historical process of policing and current policies of policing. So I think one of the important things that a new police chief can do for our community is recognizing that harm and figuring out a way to reach those communities and let them know that they are part of the protect and serve, and really bring them into the fold of information. learning from the communities that have been affected, and while also, dealing with the homelessness issues that we're facing and the increased petty crimes that we're experiencing because of COVID-related enforcement requirements. So, yeah, but I think really it's the focus, the main challenge would be relationships.
I agree, Vice Chair, and I think compassionate policing, or I guess informative policing. And you were talking about Six Sigma, and it made me think about Myers-Briggs, the kind of a chief that we would have, the qualities, some of those qualities that that person would embrace. I think being aware that in a community like Santa Barbara, that there are immense needs among the entire community, and how very important it is to recognize the minority members of the community, and to ensure that they are heard, and that they know that they can be heard, and that they do have a place in the conversation.
I think also bringing in some of the, or I should say strengthening some of the programs that have been previously introduced, such as the co-response, how to honor the requests and demands of community for reallocating some of the funds from badge wearing, gun holding officers to maybe social workers or non-sworn personnel that can respond maybe a little more appropriately based on their training. So being able to really strengthen and expand that type of programming would be, that would be great. It would be a challenge because some of these ideas have already been implemented elsewhere, but it's still a relatively new program that's being used in various areas for homeless, mental health, domestic violence, child-related. So there's plenty of areas where we have given the responsibility solely to police officers when it could be managed and responded by others.
Great input, commissioners. John or Max, do you guys want to give some suggestions to Mr. Nelson?
Tough job that you got in front of you, sir. My biggest thing has always been people that service the city should live in the city. And I know that that's, for these types of positions is very rare. But I don't know, maybe someone that has Central Coast or Southern California experience would be best. But anyway, that's just me. Even for like the regular police officers, I always think people that live in town should get precedent, but.
That's great input.
Yeah, Max, I agree on that. Local, living local, or at least on the South Coast, would really be an issue. And of course, that depends on who wants to apply here locally, if that's possible. But yeah, it's a difficult thing to find housing and all that. So, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I agree with John and Max. I know that'd be a hat trick if you could pull off everything that we've thrown at you, Greg. I'll just add one piece. It seems like over the last couple of decades, the optics on police response have become more military, right? With the equipment, and the SWAT teams that are showing up in paramilitary uniforms. Is there any thought at the upper levels of policing to sort of dampen the optics on the military look, and maybe shifting back more to like Commissioners Travis Teague and Rodriguez have mentioned, and even Max, with stating his preference for local people, but more of the look of like the police officer is part of our community, someone that, you know, walks among us, you know, and doesn't, you know, is not trying to play, you know, like G.I. Joe or, you know, some sergeant or, you know, let's storm the bank, right? Those kind of optics, I think, have really eroded some of the trust that has been mentioned here. So I don't know, what are you seeing? I mean, are police departments still trying to grab up that big gear from the military, or have they slowed that down?
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift away from that. And, you know, historically, I think, I don't claim to be an expert on this, and but what just my own experience is a couple of things. One, you had the federal government was downsizing the military at a point and was really literally giving this equipment to agencies for free.
Right.
It was very easy for agencies to get access to this equipment at no cost. And so there were federal programs that allowed for that. At the same time, you had September 11th and the aftermath of that, and there was a heightened increase in making sure that we had Homeland Security and preparedness at all levels. And so I think those two currents in the ocean really is what advanced a lot of the militarization that you spoke of. And then in recent years, not just in the last year, but in the last several years, there's certainly been a move away from that. And there's even been some legislative efforts to even prevent it. So there is kind of the tide turning in another direction.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, you know, if people want to be in the military, they should go volunteer for the military, right? I mean, I think policing is distinctive from serving in the military.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, let me, if I could, just transition to my last question. And many of you have already given me some answers for it already, as it always happens in these conversations. But when you think about what does the ideal police chief for Santa Barbara look like, what are those traits and qualities that are going to separate or be really important to have in that position, maybe above and beyond what may be required? So what I heard already from some of you is someone that's compassionate, someone that, if possible, may live in your community, or if not, at least have the Central Coast, Southern California background, just to have a better cultural fit. But any other traits or qualities or characteristics you'd like to add to that list?
I think it would be helpful if the chief resembled the community that they would be serving. So Santa Barbara is, I believe, 46% Latino. So somebody who represents a diverse demographic, whether that's racial diversity, gender, sexual orientation, however that demographic identity might be displayed. But I think somebody who represents the actual demographic of our community would be important. And then maybe someone that has an affinity towards or experience with restorative policing or alternative to policing methods, so that we just continue to move into the trend of advancing progressive police policies.
I think someone who's a good listener, it's very easy to be action oriented, but someone who brings the strengths of that action, but who can hear, who hears our homeless people, who sees them, and who understands that they're human beings and that they have a right, as do we all, and someone who will take that extra step to be present and encourage that kind of communication within the ranks of the police department.
It's a very difficult role. In my estimation, I think it's more political than it is anything else. So I would like to see that, the next chief actually be someone who goes out and shakes hands and meets people and is present. I think, leading by example in that kind of way is leaps and bounds. So does leaps and bounds in building trust. So somebody who is, just willing to bear the burden, because that's what you are when you're at the top. So.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We need somebody who can really be a good political leader, Greg. So sounds like there's a lot of elements in play, right?
There are a lot of elements in play. It's more complex now than I don't know if I'd say than it ever has been, but it's certainly, it's a tough job.
Yep.
Well, this is all great feedback, but I don't want to leave anything on the table. Is there anything else anyone has that you'd like to share with me to help me as we take upon these next steps?
Well, I don't know if you use any of those, leadership surveys that are available, but I think it would just be really helpful if you do, or if you just can gather that information based on your interviews. But just having somebody that has a nice balance of relationship, compassion, empathy, along with strategic planning, goal-oriented, and really focusing on politics and policy, but not being so political that they, that they lose sight of community needs. So just really having that balance would be ideal.
Yeah, very good. All right, if there aren't any other comments, I just want to thank you all for, it was really nice to meet all of you and to get your input. I look forward to working with the city and the commission through these next steps. And definitely, I look forward to a chance for us to meet again. And I truly love what I do. This is, it's really a calling to do the work, but it's just a blessing to be able to continue to help cities get right leadership and be able to advance. So I feel very fortunate to be working with the city of Santa Barbara on this, and thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Greg. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, appreciate that.
Okay. All right. So we're going to change the order of the agenda a little bit. Let's go with the police and fire liaison reports quickly, and then that'll tee up item number 13. We're going to skip to 13 and let the chief, present. So, John, would you like to give any updates from the fire department? I think we already had the largest update of the week, but anything?
Beyond that, I can't top that part, but the discussions I did have with the acting chief yesterday are along the lines of what we've talked about before. We've got a strategic plan going. That's the next 4 years. That's part of what the new chief's going to encounter. Also, combined dispatch, which is really a big thing, and of course the medical ambulance contract that's coming up. So whoever that person is, is going to have a full plate. And he's going to need, he is going to need all the support we can give him. And I've told him that, and I hope you all agree. But other than that, I have nothing more to share.
Well, I just want to thank you on behalf of the commission for serving and giving your time in a very long process, to select the chief and work with the city manager. So thank you very much for your service on that, John.
Sure, you bet. I was happy to do it, and it was an experience. I've done a lot of interviews for lesser positions, but it was a big one. Thank you.
Great, good work. And Max, our police liaison.
Thank you, Chair. So had the opportunity to speak with the interim chief yesterday, actually, and I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but through the conversation, there were 3 things that he definitely wanted us to know as a commission. Number 1, he's fully committed to helping and assisting in finding the next permanent chief. From his initial assessment of the police station, he feels like things are positive, but he wants to actually come up with a full report to help identify the needs, the challenges, and of course the strengths of the department. So that'll inform the hiring process. And he's really noticed that the department as a whole is definitely committed to life and the Constitution. So off of that, I mean, where else can you go?
That's great. No, that's great. I'm really happy to hear that. That's a great report, Max. And so Max will run point with our current interim chief, and then I'm sure you'll be an integral process, inserted into this process as we go forward, Max. So looking forward to that. And if you need any tips, talk to John. But thank you very much. And if you guys want to coordinate anybody on the commission, any matters with the police department, let's try to utilize Max's point on that, right? I mean, just to take anything off your plate so that he can communicate and help you conduct your normal lives a little easier. I know we all are doing a lot. So Max is definitely our liaison, and hopefully we can exercise him, to get more information and a little bit more efficient process as we go forward in terms of reporting from our police department at a time of big change. Okay. Thanks, Max. Thanks, John. Now we'll, if everybody's following along at home, we're skipping to number 13, the agenda item, which is Chief Malakian's report. So let's go ahead and do that.
Chair Stedman, I think we want to, did we want to go ahead and have Barbara Anderson step in now, or do you want to introduce her, Chief Malakian?
I'm at the chair's discretion.
Absolutely, Chief. You go right ahead.
Well, thank you. In the spirit of what we were talking about earlier, over the course of the last year, the police department, in conjunction with the city attorney's office and two organizations I'm going to talk about in a second, SB Act and CityNet, have moved away from having law enforcement be the first response to dealing with homeless issues. And to date, the reports that I've gotten indicate that this has been a very successful model. And there's been a couple of fairly potentially controversial issues that have arisen over the last few weeks, none of which became controversial because we handled it with this new model. And in that spirit, it's my pleasure to introduce Barbara Anderson. She's the Homeless Collaborative Facilitator for SB Act. And I hope I got her title right because I'm reading off some notes here. But she joined the team in January 2020. She has a background in crisis management, working through the Western region of the United States. She works advises at public entities in emergency and business continuity planning, and she serves as a facilitator for the Act on the Homeless Collaborative. And she was gracious enough to agree to come and talk to the commission. We were asked to talk about some of our partnering efforts with SB Act and CityNet. And so Ms. Anderson, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for the invitation, Chief Malakian. I really appreciate it. And Chair Stedman and Vice Chair Rodriguez, I appreciate the opportunity to meet all of you. It really has been a privilege for SB Act and myself to be in partnership with the City of Santa Barbara in this new Act on Homelessness Collaborative. And I want to bring specific attention to our goal is not just to reduce the number of individuals experiencing homelessness, but to reduce the impacts of homelessness on every neighborhood in the City of Santa Barbara. So it really is a unique approach, taking into consideration that homelessness has reached a level that everyone in our city is impacted by it. So making sure that our business owners, our residents, as well as individuals experiencing homelessness, the service providers that work with them every single day, all feel supported. They feel their challenges are being addressed and that solutions are active and we're achieving visible and measurable results. So I was hoping just for a few minutes to share some slides. We spent quite a bit of time last year working on a strategic plan for the city of Santa Barbara. So I just wanted to go through some high level points about what our objectives are and really our structure in terms of how we facilitate the work and make sure that we're creating a system of accountability and transparency.
By the way, thanks a lot for hanging in there through the previous agenda items, Barbara.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I think it's great to hear just in terms of the priorities for the next police chief. Obviously, everything that we do now absolutely needs to take in consideration a number of elements in terms of our community, better policing, more restorative approaches to policing. We have had such a really positive, very productive and valuable partnership with the Santa Barbara City Police Department, as well as the fire department and emergency management and working in homelessness. And it's because of that partnership that we're able to really demonstrate to the community that coordination, although it takes a lot of work, is the best approach to an issue that we know is as complex as homelessness. So feel free to stop me along the way. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want a level of understanding really for every community member to know our approach and know where they can be engaged if again, they desire to do so. So this partnership started actually in the fall of 2019, so pre-COVID. The City of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara Foundation, a major philanthropic organization in our community, invested in this new collective impact approach. And I'll speak to kind of the specific components to collective impact, but it is a research-based and evidence-based approach out of Stanford that was really formulated in 2010 and 2011 to look at complex systems change. And so SB Act, we work with and for marginalized populations using this specific approach because again, we know it's really many root causes that create the level of inequity that our populations are experiencing. And we want to make sure that we're using that evidence-based approach as we work on these larger systemic issues. So this is when we joined more formally in the public-private partnership, and we serve as what we call the backbone organization. So we're not a direct service provider, but we facilitate this direct impact. So it really helps us to be a third party, to work with providers in removing barriers, to work with city partners and city staff and city departments, to really give our honest assessment of what's happening on the ground day to day so that we, again, can be more effective together. So last year, we worked on forming our steering committee. I'll speak to that in just a moment. It's really an incredible group of everyone who is committed to addressing homelessness in our city, that's impacted by homelessness in our city, and really representative of key sectors that need to be involved in the decision-making at the highest level. We also launched what we call regional action plans. Again, we have a number of regional action plans that are working specifically with neighborhoods that are disproportionately impacted by homelessness. So these have been going on, some of them for as long as 8 months. Our shortest one is the waterfront, and that's been going on now for 2 months. It really is a way for us to create a platform where we're, again, actively engaged with individuals, business owners, and residents and city leaders that are working to implement neighborhood-based solutions. And as we move into this year, we're working on implementing specific strategies, and I'll get to that in a little bit as well. But these regional action plans, they have 60 or 90-day timelines. So again, we're assessing if strategies and resources deployed are working. If they're working, we work to replicate that in other targeted regions in that neighborhood. And or if something isn't working, then we make that shift, we make that pivot, and we're making adjustments along the way. This also creates the structure of accountability, reporting, what we call a plan for learning and collective learning that SB Act is responsible for facilitating and making sure that we're reporting regularly to all leadership bodies as well as to the public. That level of engagement, education, opportunity for everyone to understand what we're doing to address the issue of homelessness, again, because we know that everyone's impacted by it. So the collective impact approach includes this critical piece, which is called the common agenda. And in its basic form, it's getting everyone on the same page. But what's really critical here is I think you've seen a lot of local jurisdictions, including the county, have developed comprehensive strategic plans on homelessness. But this approach allowed us to co-create and co-develop the strategic plan with all of our key partners. So that's why it took 8 months for us to complete all of these key components of the common agenda, but you build that critical buy-in along the way, and partners are able to engage, provide input, we're able to align priorities, and we create a strategic plan in the end that everyone is fully invested in. And so we adopted this strategic plan at a city council meeting on December 15th of last year. So this is our incredible steering committee. This is our leadership team. Our chair is Mayor Murillo. We have city staff. Even the city library, we're understanding too the depths of how they're impacted. They have approximately 50 to 75 individuals a day when they are open that they have noted for a lot of reasons are experiencing homelessness. And we are working when they reopen to make sure that they have additional capacity to be able to provide outreach and case management support to those individuals. We have county leadership and county agencies, again, are critical to making sure that resources are deployed strategically in the city of Santa Barbara, and that we're not duplicating efforts, but we're actually mutually supportive of each other. Housing Authority, Behavioral Wellness, Cottage, Path, Transition House, philanthropic organizations, representation from our downtown businesses, as well as our East Side businesses. And then again, what's critical for us is making sure that people without homes, those who live the experience, are part of our leadership, and they're providing input in terms of our decision-making process along the way. So this is our mission. Our community members in the city of Santa Barbara are experiencing housing insecurity and homelessness, and the effects are widespread. The Act on Homelessness Collaborative is committed to reducing and preventing homelessness and its impacts in the city of Santa Barbara by working in partnership using a variety of innovative solutions. Again, this is the continuum. It's not just a reduction, but it's also prevention, and it includes the impacts of homelessness on our broader community. These are our goals, and I apologize for the wonky language. We definitely synthesize this when we're speaking to different audiences, but I wanted to kind of give you the full level of detail here because I actually don't have additional slides on our strategies or our evaluation plan, which if you want access to that, I share it all the time and I'm happy to speak to it separately, but I don't want to take up too much time this evening on your agenda. So our first goal is increasing the number of affordable housing units in the city of Santa Barbara. Our second goal is strengthening the capacity of organizations that provide permanent housing placement services to increase the rate of housing retention. So again, increasing that pathway to affordable housing units, making sure once they're placed in that supportive housing environment, they're successful in that environment. The third goal speaks to what we call diversion and prevention. So reducing the number of individuals that enter homelessness from a house situation. Diversion includes things like reunification. It includes the restorative policing program that Santa Barbara PD facilitates. It really is making sure that we're understanding an individual's needs. If there's an opportunity for them to reunify with a family member, a friend, if they had a job in another region, but they can't afford to get there, but once they get there, they have a safe place to be. We facilitate those conversations regularly across a number of providers. It's actually the lowest cost, highest impact solution that we can facilitate. So more resources being targeted specifically for diversion and prevention. The last goal being around the coordination and availability of outreach and case management services. So I know many of you have heard this in the past, but it really is so important that we have more boots on the ground, that we have regular faces for individuals experiencing homelessness to interact with, that they're building a trusted relationship. More than half of the individuals currently experiencing homelessness have entered homelessness because of trauma. And we know that once they're living on the street for more than 6 months, they're being re-traumatized. So it is this level of, yes, making sure that we have programs like the co-response unit, making sure that we have more mental health and social workers engaged and really trained to facilitate de-escalation strategies. but also just touching base, having conversation, acknowledging, these individuals as members and neighbors in our communities, and making sure that if they're ready to receive help, that we're able to say yes and make sure that the connection is facilitated at the time and the moment that they're prepared to do that. These are the numbers. And so I tend to use this because it is really, I think, the moment that a lot of our community members and leaders see, oh my goodness, this is what we need to accomplish. This is what's ahead of us. Our strategic plan and our steering committee leadership did not want a 10-year strategic plan or a 5-year strategic plan. They were really specific about making it a 3-year plan. One, because we know the resources that we have now, and we can kind of estimate the resources that may be available in the next 3 years. Current leadership buy-in, current leadership support, business owner engagement, nonprofit service providers have staff turnover. But in that 3-year period, there tends to be less shifts. So it is something that we can plan for and achieve. And then after the 3 years, and including a full evaluation and assessment, we'll be able to create yet another strategic plan with those goals once we have achieved what we set out to achieve for this period of time. So we can't achieve the need that you see on this screen in 3 years, but we absolutely can address a significant part of this. So when we say we need 262 emergency shelter beds to serve the current need in the city of Santa Barbara, this includes our currently unhoused population. So not those who are living in their vehicles, not those who are currently in shelters. That's where the transitional housing and the permanent supportive housing comes in. So you, I think, are aware that we have 914 individuals experiencing homelessness as of our last 2020 point in time count. This is why you don't see a 914 emergency shelter beds. You see 262 because that's the number that is currently living outdoors. Any questions on our goals and the numbers that you have before you?
It's not really a question, but a recognition that these are, I think when one thinks of homeless service providers, they don't necessarily think about one of those services being obtaining affordable housing.
Right.
So it's very impressive that that goal number 1 is adding more affordable housing availability. So I just acknowledge the forethought and recognize how big a goal that is, especially here in Santa Barbara.
Well, and I think in terms of our neighbors and business owners really feeling the impacts of homelessness, it feeling visibly more now than it has in the past, is because we just don't have the current capacity in our emergency shelters, nor do we have the supportive housing units available. So we need to make sure that we're creating those opportunities and we're building that level of infrastructure so that we can facilitate a systems flow. We'll always have individuals experiencing homelessness, but our goal is to make sure that we have capacity among these facilities and our nonprofit service providers to provide their appropriate services, and that we can facilitate them through the system to eventually get them to a permanent supportive housing environment.
Hey, Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
So is this doable? Are we gonna, do you think we're gonna do this? Are we gonna hit this goal?
It has to be doable. So
this is a no-fail option then, right?
This is a no-fail option. So, we get a lot of questions about enforcement, and legally we're unable to enforce in a lot of circumstances because we don't have another place for individuals to go. So it really is important that we are committing to building more capacity for both shelter beds as well as housing units. So again, we have the reduced impacts to our neighborhoods, but we're also helping every individual that lives in our community have access to a roof over their head and a safe place to stay, as well as food and other basic needs. It really is critical. And we find that 78% of the current number of individuals experiencing homelessness are from Santa Santa Barbara County. Their last address was here. So they really are people who live in our community, that this is what they know, this is what they're familiar with, and this is where they want to stay.
That makes sense.
I guess a follow-up question, Chair, our Chair Stedman was asking, is it doable? How has COVID-19 impacted these plans and goals?
So COVID-19 has actually impacted most severely our shelter bed capacity, because we want to make sure that we're honoring social distancing guidelines and other public health requirements. It really has reduced shelter capacity overall by 20% countywide. So again, that's why you see more individuals sleeping on our streets and in our parks and in our neighborhoods. The housing development and housing pathway has actually been on track, and there are more resources coming in to do that more aggressively. We also have specific requirements for local housing allocations that need to be met. They seem unachievable in the period of time that they're required to accomplish them. But I will say our city and county housing authorities are doing incredible work. We have mainstream vouchers, Section 8 vouchers opening for the first time in years. And that's all because of the federal and state government resources that are coming in, as well as additional tax incentives that they utilize to make these developments possible. We also had Project Roomkey, and that was facilitated by the county with one of our local nonprofit service providers, PATH. And the housing placement rate was actually exceedingly high for individuals that were in that what we call non-congregate sheltering environment. It's because we knew where they are. They could make appointments regularly. Their case managers knew where to check in versus trying to find them as they circulate different neighborhoods. So that, in terms of facilitating, understanding, and addressing their needs, we also were able to lift some restrictions and requirements on funding for emergency response purposes, which gave us a level of flexibility, again, to meet folks where they're at and be able to address their needs and get them into a successful housing situation. So on one hand, more difficult, on other hands, actually really helpful. So if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Barbara, the 18,000 per unit for permanent, other permanent housing, is that like a one-time 18,000 to get somebody housed, or is that an annual?
It's not an annual. Some refurbishing, some shared housing environment, smaller properties have been acquired in the refurbishing per unit. So this includes a lot of variety. It's a kind of another word for miscellaneous, but there's less requirements, less restrictions, and there are first and last month incentive programs, landlord incentive programs, and then rental subsidies for a period of 8 to 12 months. So this kind of includes the more flexible options that we have to help residents. And I just wanted to move quickly on to just the structure. So I'll touch quickly on working groups. These are our high-level issue-based conversations and dialogues. We have 4 of them that we're facilitating currently. And again, you see that they're aligned with our goals. So we have a homelessness prevention working group, a housing and shelter working group, a housing retention working group, and our lived experience working group. Again, these are folks that are living the experience of being on the streets or being in a shelter or living in their vehicles that are telling us what is working and not working in the system that's meant to support them. And these working groups, we have monthly facilitated meetings. This is where partner agencies, philanthropic organizations, our highest level agencies in terms of working on the solution, having case managers, having outreach, everyone from shelters to nonprofit housing providers, and those that provide mental health and counseling, all come together for these specific working group meetings. We work to address gaps in the available resources. And then again, we're constantly collecting data, learning from that data, assessing, refining, scaling, and or exiting a strategy based on that data. And then we report regularly to the working group itself, as well as to our leadership, our steering committee, and to the city council. And lastly, this is what Chief Malikian was referring to in terms of our work with Santa Barbara PD and CityNet, or our regional action plans. And so we've selected regions that, as you know, from being residents of our city, that we find are disproportionately impacted by homelessness. So we can't be in every neighborhood yet, and every neighborhood is impacted. But these were really the first 3 that we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on. One, because we know that business owners were feeling that impact every day, that residents were sharing concerns with us about feeling unsafe to walk the streets in their neighborhoods, as well as a number of individuals experiencing homelessness that we know with continued outreach and continued case management that we would be able to help. So East Side, State Street, and Waterfront. Our East Side is our longest running regional action plan along with State Street. We actually were able to conduct a pilot on State Street pre-COVID with CityNet, and we focused on the 400 and 500 block. A number of individuals were agreeable to case management, and we were able to facilitate 9 street exits in 60 days. And so really that approach of targeted resources, CityNet constant outreach and case management. State Street, we also engaged the downtown ambassadors, which are just an incredible group of individuals. And again, they're the familiar face. They understand what's going on in their blocks. They understand what's kind of out of whack. They're able to say, hey, there's someone who needs help. They communicate that to CityNet. CityNet then follows up. If there is an incident that requires police response or the response from now the co-response unit, then all that communication, all that pathway is facilitated through the collaboration. These regional action plans meet weekly. So it's this check-in of where are the concerns, are concerns being addressed, targeted regions. So we have 3 specific regions in each of these neighborhoods that we're working on a 90-day plan to minimize impact in that specific region. And that is a variety of solutions from different parking, natural barriers, fencing, security, working with local on-site security, especially for private establishments, making sure, again, individuals are getting the proper outreach and support, as well as working with city staff and city leadership on other improvements that we can facilitate in that neighborhood. The last is Alameda Park, which is our neighborhood navigation center. This is facilitated every Thursday evening where a number of service providers come together to provide what we call wraparound holistic services from healthcare to hygiene, to a warm meal, to food and clothing, and other really important items. Again, because that compassionate care, that compassionate response helps us also reduce problematic behavior in that region as well. So again, pathways for information sharing, community-wide solutions. We really want to make sure that we're addressing all of the concerns of our neighbors. And this is our goal. So we have a 100-person plan for 2021, and that is 100 street exits. And that would be specific to our regional action plan regions. And so we're targeting 25 street exits in those 4 regions previously noted. These are the weekly facilitated meetings, key outreach and case management provided by CityNet. There was an increase in investment to CityNet by the City of Santa Barbara and City Council in December. That has been incredible for us. And our communication with law enforcement and other city staff has just gone beautifully well. They're also participating in these weekly meetings. So if there is immediate concern that a business owner or resident brings up, we're able to address it almost immediately. And if we can't address it right away, we come back the following week and we're able to say what we could do, what we can't do and why, or that we might need more time to be able to implement that solution. I know that was a lot of information at you at one time. And again, if anyone wants more detail, I'm happy to share that with you or meet with you separately. But I just, again, want to share my gratitude to the City of Santa Barbara, city officials, city leadership, and the fire department and the police department. We've had nothing but positive interactions. And I think homelessness has reached a level that everyone knows that we have to do whatever it takes to be able to move forward. So happy to answer any additional questions. I know you have other items in your agenda to get to as well.
Barbara, I had a question about reunification. Do we have any figures on how that goes? Or I know there's folks in the PD that work on it. One of my friends in particular have been working on it. Any stats on that?
Yeah, the restorative policing program reported to us last year they were able to facilitate 79 reunifications. And that is a huge number at a very low cost. And they actually laughed when I said, hey, you know, what do you have for a budget to be able to facilitate these reunifications and diversions? And they said, I think it's about $1,200 a month, but don't tell anyone because no one's ever asked us. No one ever put a limit on it. And Officer Burley presented to what we call our all-call regional action plan. So that's every partner in every region coming together. He was able to share their approach as well as their investment in starting up the co-response unit. So that work together, and I would say that the personality of Officer Burley and his team makes it really a beautifully successful program. And then we also have CityNet. So they have a Whatever It Takes fund as well. And those are a little bit more costly. There's flights usually involved for individuals that have been experiencing homelessness for a longer period of time. But again, if there's any sort of brief opportunity, even treatment or other kind of residential treatment centers, they're able to facilitate that as well. So we're going to get their first quarter data soon, and we're going to be able to report that out next month.
Oh, thank you. That's good news.
It's great news.
So, commissioners, I've had the pleasure of being a regular attendee of some of the RAP meetings for the waterfront West Side area or West Beach area, representing a group of businesses in that area. And I have to say, I encourage you to reach out to Barbara and get a link to the Zoom meetings. And I encourage you to attend because what they've created using this collective impact model is really effective. It's effective in serving and helping the folks that are living on our streets. I mean, they have some big needs, and they're really being attended to, and also addressing the needs of the neighbors that are affected, that are impacted by homelessness, and the businesses. And sometimes those three needs or agendas don't always blend well. But this group has been able to, I think, effectively address those needs. And I see it as a nice model for how other groups and organizations can address some of the critical community issues that we're experiencing pre and during COVID. So I really invite you and encourage you to attend some of these meetings. And I want to just thank you, Barbara, for being part of that team that developed and put this together, and also for coming here and sharing what the work that you're doing today.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Rodriguez. I really appreciate your engagement and your leadership as well. I think you've seen us, we can take the heat, and we need to take the heat. I think it's important for community leaders and community organizations to be honest and straightforward and create an environment where we can have productive dialogue. And everyone has valid concerns. Everyone has valid issues. And it's not for us to prioritize anyone over the other. We're trying to really make sure that we're embracing all of it. We're engaging every individual that wants to engage and be involved. And again, facilitate solutions when we can, and if we can't, we'll tell you why. Absolutely.
And I saw that Barbara pinned her email address in the chat, so feel free to ask for a meeting invite.
I'm sorry, any other questions or input from the commission? Well, Barbara, you have a very important mission and a very wide-ranging job that probably just cycles, right? It just keeps on turning. Mm-hmm. So I laud your efforts, and thanks for keeping us informed.
Thank you so much. And again, through Vice Chair Rodriguez and other mechanisms, I'm happy to share our reports. We have them developed at the end of every quarter. So she can share that with you, or I'm happy to report back at any time. So thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a joy to meet all of you too.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much, Barbara. All right, guys. So now we're going to flip back to the agenda, which is actually item number 10, old business. Are there any questions that need clarification from the commission? All right, good. That's good. This is probably the first meeting we've had in a long time. We haven't had to hash any old business, so that's great. And how about new business then? Item number 11. Any new items that anyone on the commission wants to agendize for our next meeting? All right.
Chair Stedman, we did have a public commenter. Anna Marie wanted to say something. I do believe on that last item.
Sure. Item.
I'll unmute you, Anna Marie.
If you could reopen item 10, I would totally appreciate that, as well as then item number 11, because those were closed before public comment.
Sure. We'll reopen item number 10. Is that where you want to make a comment?
I actually wanted to make a comment on both, but let's start with item number 10. Okay, great. So commissioners, during Tuesday's city council meeting, the council approved $800,000 in funds directed at homelessness. The Santa Barbara actually has the second highest rate of youth homelessness, and this is ages 18 to 24 in the entire state. So we're second. None of the funds that they actually dedicated on Tuesday actually went for housing for that homeless population. So I wanted to ask Barbara, and I don't know if she's still on the line or not, but what organizations SB Act actually refers people to? How many contacts in her current database are actually age 18 to 24, and what percentage of the homeless population really is that here in Santa Barbara? And then the last question I was just going to ask is, what is the priority that Santa Barbara SB Act actually has regarding the homeless population? I mean, is their highest priority families? Is it youth? Is it those that are chronically homeless, homeless with medical issues, mental health issues, alcohol, or drugs? I believe that if we get children or young adults, housed as soon as they become homeless or very shortly afterwards, and we provide them with the services that they need, that we're not going to have them or see them as a homeless individual in their later years. So I'm just curious, what is SB Act doing with regards to that, and who are we actually referring these individuals to? So is Barbara still on, or has she left?
I'm here, Anne Marie. I'm happy to answer those questions for you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay,
Now
and
I'm
just for clarification, Anne Marie, your questions are referring to item number 13 on the agenda. They're not.
Well, SB Act just gave the presentation on homelessness and who they were actually, working with here in the city. So that's why I'm asking the question now.
Yeah, I understand.
And Anne Marie joins us for our East Side Regional Action Plan. So I have our contact information. I don't want to consume additional time on the agenda, but Noah's Anchorage is our organization and shelter specifically targeting youth experiencing homelessness in that 18 to 24-year-old range. So I'm happy to share the breakdown by age in terms of the city of Santa Barbara, as well as county of Santa Barbara. We also had a county 100-day challenge to reduce youth experiencing homelessness. And the county strategic plan has an objective to end youth homelessness. So at the county level, it absolutely is our priority. But I do want to articulate that all of us are under a housing first policy, which is we need to house the most vulnerable and most chronically homeless individuals first. So some of those policies have been lifted under COVID-19 and that we can house anyone depending on the need, but all of us, all agencies have to implement a housing first approach.
And I just want to point out that Noah's Anchorage only houses those that are 12 to 17. So they don't actually house anyone 18 to 24. Right. And it does sound like, you are not concentrating on family or youth, but really very chronically I guess you could say the chronic homelessness with a lot of drug, alcohol, mental health issues. Is that right?
Our leadership team decided to not specifically target a group experiencing homelessness. Our street exits are any individual, any family at any age, but our housing policy is a housing first policy.
And so it would not, again, who is being targeted with housing first? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Chronic and most vulnerable is the housing first policy by the federal government.
There's a great definition regarding that, and that's typically individuals that you wouldn't say those individuals are family. That those individuals are not young adults that don't have substance abuse issues, but the individuals that, long-term homelessness with a lot of mental health, alcohol, and drug use, when that may not necessarily be the largest, population that we have here in Santa Barbara. So thank you very much for answering those questions.
And Anne-Marie, I will follow up with our detailed level data that we captured on the East Side, State Street, and Waterfront that is specific to the age breakdown. So I can share that breakdown with you, as well as where they're currently residing or frequenting or spending most of their time, and where we're targeting resources in terms of case management and outreach. I'm happy to follow up with you offline.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, is there public comment on item 11? We'll reopen that for new business.
Nobody for that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. All right. And we've already addressed item number 13. So now we're going to get to Fire Chief's monthly report, item number 12 on tonight's agenda.
Good afternoon, Chair Stedman, Commissioners Rodriguez, Allman, Peck, and Travis Stieg. My name is Chris Males, Interim Fire Chief with the Fire Department. I'm here to present a monthly report to you. I have 3 items that I want to cover this afternoon with you. One is your response to a request to look into the services the Fire Department provides to take care of the homeless in our community. I'm also going to present some updated fire stats data, building on the information that I gave you last month. And then I have a request of the commission that I'll talk about at the very end. So I'd like to share my screen with you if that's okay. And I just want to make sure, can you guys see my screen right now?
No.
Okay.
Chief Males, I'm getting that set up right now.
Okay.
Sorry
Great.
about that.
No problem.
Okay, you have it.
There we go. Okay. All right. Can we see it now?
Yep.
Okay. Hold on one second. Let me just make sure I get back on here. Okay. So this is my Fire Chief's report. The purpose of this PowerPoint, I've got 13 slides for you, and I will share a few slides on homelessness, and I will share a few slides on fire stats. So without further ado, I wanted to share a little bit about homeless incident responses. Before I begin, I'll tell you that the City Fire Department has been accumulating this data for a very limited time. I'm going to share with you that we actually have more data on medical or EMS responses than we actually do on fire responses. The reason for that is that we changed RMS, or Records Management System platforms, in the middle of, toward the middle of 2020. For fire reports. However, we had much more history on EMS reports. So we're going to get a little more specific or drill into EMS a little bit more than we'll drill into fire reports. But in keeping with what I've shared with you over the last couple of commission meetings, our EMS calls are about 75% in the city of Santa Barbara, and that number is reflective of our responses to homeless calls also. We are seeing about 75% of our calls to the homeless population involve medical calls. So just a little bit, let's see, I lost my screen there just for a second. Let's see, I apologize, 1 second here. Okay, wait, back up. I don't know what happened. There we go. Okay, so just some terminology really quickly. You'll hear me refer to NFIRS or NFIRS data. And I'm not sure if the previous fire chief shared this with you, but NFIRS stands for National Fire Incident Reporting System. When a fire captain completes a report, that information is uploaded into a server. And once a quarter, the information is then given to the state, which then goes to the nation. And that's how we learn about how many fires there were in the United States, how many deaths there were due to fires, how many this, how many that. It's all based on NFIRS data, and we are required to report this. So every single call we go on, someone is completing an NFIRS report. So that NFIRS data comes from our records management system. We use a records management system called ImageTrend. And ImageTrend is the company name. And when we go out on any incident, the computer-aided dispatch data, including response times, is downloaded straight to the ImageTrend platform. And then our fire captains complete that report. If it's an EMS call, they also complete a second report. So every time they go on an EMS call, they complete a fire report and they complete an EMS report. So for today's discussion, though, since we've really only been capturing this data for a short period of time, I'm going to draw some conclusions. I'm going to be very specific about where our shortcomings are, but I think you're going to start to see some patterns. And just to hit a quick summary, we're looking at about 4.5 calls per day. We are responding to homeless calls. Some of the costs I'm going to share with you today are based on an industry standard data or industry standard methodology for to figuring out how much or how much it costs to respond to a fire incident. And once again, my screen went. Are you guys still seeing my screen okay? Because I just lost my screen. Okay, I apologize. There we go. Oops, then I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Just a second. I apologize. Something's going. Okay, so let's talk about homeless calls in the fourth quarter. Okay, so that was October through December. And again, this is coming from our RMS database called ImageTrend. In the quarter, the fourth quarter, October through December of 2020, we had a total of 2,847 calls for service. Of those calls, and that's all calls for service, 440 of those calls involved homeless, or a total of about 15.45% of our total calls. So let's talk about that for a second. How do we decide if it's a homeless call? Okay, in both our NFIRS report and our EMS report, we have a checkbox that is in that, and by the way, it's all completed electronically. We have a checkbox that the captains complete. And the question is simple: was homelessness involved? Okay, now, do they make a guess? No, they don't, okay? They make an absolute determination that this is a case involving homelessness. If it's a medical call, they ask the patient. If it's a fire call, it has to directly be attributed to, say, a homeless encampment, okay? If there's a fire near a homeless camp that may have been started by a cigarette, that's not directly attributed to a homeless call. So that number is what I would say rather conservative. It's probably very accurate. Again, there's no guessing. We determine whether the patient is homeless or not by a series of questions, or we determine directly if homelessness is involved on a fire call. So in the left column, you're seeing, again, total calls. In the right column, you're seeing EMS only responses, okay? So in the fourth quarter, we had 2,120 total EMS calls, and 409 of those involved homelessness, or 19.29% of our EMS calls are homeless related. So really, if you compare those two, we only had 31 non-medical calls during the fourth quarter of 2020. In other words, 409 were medical and 31 could have fallen into the category of some type of fire, public assist, something like that other than a medical call. So we'll look at the first quarter to date. And what I did was I pulled data for, right up to and including yesterday. So in the first quarter of 2021, For all calls in the city of Santa Barbara, we've had approximately 2,547 calls, and 421 of those have involved homeless calls, or 16.53%. Moving over to the right column, our EMS only responses, 413 involve homelessness, or 19.38%. Now, I want to make another clarification at this point. Does that mean 413 different patients? Definitely not. Okay, I'm going to be very vague, but I'm going to talk about one client that we've been seeing. We have seen this client in the last year 280 times. So we see these patients multiple times. And unfortunately, as I've mentioned before, all of us who are privileged to have a private physician, when we don't feel well, we call our doctor's office and we go see our doctor. But when someone is homeless, the number they call for the doctor is often 911. So we see a lot of repeat patients, and that's typical in any system. So a little bit about our response summary for the entire year of 2020. We responded to approximately 1,700 homeless calls in the city of Santa Barbara in the entirety of 2020. Now, I had to extrapolate some of the data because we had some missing data, but if you look back at what I've showed you for 2 quarters, we're averaging around 425 calls per quarter. So we're staying pretty consistent. But again, of those 1,700, almost 1,100 were medical calls. So, extrapolate the numbers, about 600 over the year were non-medical related. So the vast majority, again, are medical related, but we are seeing homeless people for, again, warming fires, vegetation fires within a homeless camp, public assistance calls. A homeless person may fall, just need assistance up, things like that. So, but again, the vast majority are EMS calls. So what I'd like to do next is to apply some basic costs to provide service. Now, there are several ways to calculate cost for a fire service to provide care or to respond to a call. Some departments simply take their budget, divide it by the number of calls, and they come up with a cost per call. Some departments really divide out the types of calls and assign different costs to the types of calls. I'm going to present you with some very basic costing information at this point. So in the left column, let's make some assumptions. Number one, our firefighters respond on an apparatus. The great majority of them respond on a fire engine. We have 7 engine companies in the city of Santa Barbara, and they have 3 personnel on each. Now, our ladder truck also responds to medical calls, and they have 4, but we're just going to assume that the majority of the calls within the city of Santa Barbara are handled by an engine company with 3 people. All right, I'm going to make another assumption. The next assumption is that it takes about an hour for each call. Now, a medical call, let's say a fire engine begins responding on a medical call, police department gets on scene and tells the fire engine they can cancel and not continue into the scene. Well, that would not be a homeless related call because we don't know, we didn't make patient contact. If we get on scene, and we've talked about response times, we typically spend 15 to 20 minutes on scene with patients, sometimes longer. So we take 5-6 minutes to get to the scene. We spend 15, 20 minutes on scene. We take 10 minutes to get back. We complete our documentation. We restock our engine, our EMS supplies, et cetera. We're going to make an assumption for brevity that we're looking at about 1 hour per call. Now, what about a vegetation fire where 3 engine companies respond and they're on scene in a homeless encampment for 2 or 3 hours? So there's that side too. There's that level of engagement. But the fact that 75% of our calls are medicals, we really complete those calls within about an hour. So that's the number that we're going to use for today's purposes of discussion. So one of the other things that fire departments do, and as I go through this costing, I want to just cover one little line item before we get into the detailed spreadsheet. And those are what we call indirect costs or administrative costs. Every fire engine that responds to a call does not respond in a vacuum. They are well supported by the city. They're well supported by human resources, by mayor and council, by risk management, by public works. So typically what fire departments do when they are billing for service is they attach an indirect cost of, and our department uses 17.84%. The reason why this is important is when you hear that we go out of town on mutual aid assignments, let's say our fire engine responds up to Northern California on a mutual aid assignment, we charge out our services at cost, plus we add 17.84% to cover some of the ancillary costs of having that apparatus respond to the call. So that'll be that one line item that we look at. But let me just share with you how our fire department typically calculates billing, okay? And that is with this spreadsheet. Looking at the top left, a standard fire engine per hour is calculated at $179 per hour, and that's per the city-approved fee schedule. The personnel are calculated, as you can see, for really what we call a total per hour cost to respond at $304. So again, that's a rather industry standard way of calculating. And again, we could take our total budget, divide it by call volume and come up with a number. This is a little bit more accurate. Now, again, we use an hour for calculation, and sure, some calls can be 25 minutes, other calls can be 5 hours. So it's really a fairly good number, the conservative number that we look at. Now we're looking at approximately 1,700 calls per year. At a calculation of $304 per hour, we have $517,000 cost that we can attribute to this type of response. Our medical supplies do cost. Our oxygen masks, our oxygen cannulas, our bandages, our splints, all of that kind of stuff that we use on medical calls also have a cost to it. And then I mentioned that indirect cost. So really, if you were to look at a cost, we're looking at about $600,000+ per year that the fire department spends responding to homeless calls. Now, some would argue and say, well, the fire department's already there, because you responded or you didn't respond. But again, we try to remove the subjectivity and try to be as objective as we can. And this is how we calculate out responses to mutual aid calls in Northern California or beyond. When we're sending firefighters out of town for 14 days, we typically use this type of a spreadsheet to seek reimbursement. So that is in a nutshell, kind of how we came up with some of the calculations on this. It's preliminary. It's rather new, as I said, in a sense that we don't have years and years of data. But I think if you're looking at the general numbers, you're looking again at about anywhere between 15 and 20%, or about 4.5 calls per day is what we're looking at in the city. One thing I want to talk about, and I was so privileged to hear Barbara speak, because it's really important to know that our firefighters aren't just responding to calls. There's a lot of coordination that goes on with the police department, with restorative policing, with CityNet. They've become an incredible partner in our community. And when our firefighters start to see patterns out there, they respond to patients multiple times. We're really working as a referral service also. We really are the first people that often see homeless in crisis. And our folks are reaching out and they're saying, would you like some help? Is there something we can do for you today? So we're not just responding to medical calls and fire calls. We're really trying to also fix the problem on a long-term basis. So I'll pause there with any questions, because the next section we're going to go into is just fire stats. But I want to know if there was any questions at this point.
I think it's fascinating. It might be a little detailed for other people on the commission, but I actually do this for a living. I reduce the indirect costs for global corporations. So that indirect calculation is something I live with every single day. just imagine large spend structures. We go right after that indirect spend, step one, in order to increase the efficiency and bring more profits to the bottom line. So I'm fascinated by that. And that 17.84% figure that you came up with, right, as an add-on, right, cost plus or mutual aid, it's a fungible figure. So that's very interesting. One thing, though, I wanted to ask you about is, what about this client that we've seen 280 times? I mean, what are we doing about that, Chief?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, I have to be a little bit vague because I want to maintain patient confidentiality, of course. These patients are very challenging. One of the things that we have to remove is an assumption that someone wants help. Some people want to have the emergent problem taken care of and they want to be left alone. And so we have to respond and take care of this, individual as best as we can, but this individual can then refuse further care. Just yesterday, I was on the phone with multiple providers from Cottage Hospital to law enforcement, to fire, to ambulance, working to try to better our response to this patient. But this patient is not completely unique. This is, we do have patients that do tax our system. And again, our job is not to just show up, but our job is to do our best to refer. So this case in mind has had CityNet involved. It's had case management at Cottage involved. It's had population health involved. And we're just trying to be very patient and to work through a situation that is really, really complex. The individual is of sound mind and just wants to be taken care of and have the emergency taken care of, and then wants to go on leading their lives. So it's a very challenging case. But again, there are numerous patients in our city that and not just homeless. There's people that live in a house that call us, multiple times a month for care. So it's very complex, but I think what I'd like to relay is the utmost confidence in the professionalism of all of the providers, from law enforcement to fire to CityNet. We are so fortunate to have CityNet. Cottage does an amazing job with public outreach, population health, et cetera. So it's a work in progress. How's that?
That's the best answer you can give, right? I mean, and I think it's reasonable. I was just curious. I mean, it doesn't really sound like an aberration, right, in data, because there's other numbers that are similar. But it is an interesting insight. Thank you.
Definitely.
So I was trying to do some math, and there's so many ways to sort of calculate. Having Barbara on in the meeting earlier, talking about the costs associated with permanent housing, and then the costs associated with fire calls or calls for service for either fire or EMS. Well, so my first question is 15% of calls for service for fire-related issues, and then 19% of calls for service for EMS-related services. Is that in alignment with regional or state trends for fire departments?
That's a really good question. I don't have data in front of me as far as regional trends or trends within the county. I only have access, of course, to data within the city of Santa Barbara. But in my communications with other fire chiefs, municipalities all over California are dealing with similar impacts. And cities, we're starting to see more constructive and more, I guess the word would be more customized response to medical related calls. One of the things that's really important is, we're just looking at what I would call the front side of the system. We're just looking at response. We also, when looking at medical calls, we need to look at the cost of transporting them to the hospital for care within the hospital, et cetera. We're just looking at the front side of really only Santa Barbara City Fire's data. So the costs are likely obviously much higher for our patients in Santa Barbara. But you ask a really good question, and I'm really excited to be knowledgeable in what fire departments and EMS systems are doing to customize their response. I'll give you an example. The city of San Luis Obispo, I just learned last week, is in the process of setting up a special unit that will respond to low acuity patients with a fire department EMT and a behavioral health specialist. And it's kind of an offshoot of the restorative policing. So, and a community-based approach. All of this ties in big picture items to a regional fire department dispatch that will do 100% medical dispatch interrogation with nurse navigation. And we're hoping for a customized response where we can perhaps send a low acuity unit, perhaps only send a fire truck, perhaps only send an ambulance, all of those kind of things to try to streamline our system. And we are at the precipice right now of moving in the next few years to a really, really state-of-the-art medical system that's going to take a good look at how our patients are cared for in the community.
So when I did the math, the $614,000 per year for just based on last year, that comes out to about $51,000 a month. So before I assume, I'd like to hear from you, Chief Males, if you think that having the city providing or supporting, let's say a city-specific room key project where the city invested in hotel beds for homeless, if that would then save resources for police, for fire, because they're housed in one area, they'll have, medical staff there, so they're not calling you because they're, having a medical symptoms. I'm just curious what your recommendation or what you would advise on that.
Sure, that's a Commissioner Rodriguez. Thank you so much. That is a great question. It ties into a much bigger picture, and so let me provide a little bit of background. When 911 is accessed and the fire department responds, we respond under very specific emergency medical services laws and regulations from the county up to and including the state and federal government. As soon as we put that patch on our shoulder that says EMT, we have very specific scopes of practice, and we have some limitations as far as what we can do. So we'll go one step further. A fire engine and an ambulance respond to State and Creo for a medical emergency with a homeless patient. By law, in the state of California, an ambulance can only transport a patient to an acute care facility, okay? If we respond on a medical emergency, we have to take that patient to a hospital, okay? We cannot transport to, say, a sober living center or a step-down clinic. We can't do that. Now, there's legislation happening right now in the state to allow what we call alternate transport destination. And that would allow ambulances to take patients elsewhere to more customize their care. All right, we'll just use a patient that maybe has drank too much alcohol and isn't safe to remain on the street. But a paramedic has done an assessment and they've deemed that the patient really doesn't need to go to the hospital, but really just needs to be watched. And so you've brought up a very, very good point in a sense that I think what our community needs is it needs somewhere besides an emergency. And this really, I could speak for every community, not just Santa Barbara, needs a location where some of these lower acuity patients could be cared for instead of the hospital emergency room. Now, that's going to be met with resistance from nurses and physicians, et cetera, that have a comfort level of wanting to see these patients. Be very careful. Let me share a very quick story with you. I was really fortunate a couple of years ago to go up and spend 3 days with Seattle's Medic One program. That is Seattle Fire Department has a paramedic program that is I would say, the envy of the entire United States. I spent an entire shift in downtown Seattle with what they call an aid car, which is a basic life support, 2 firefighters on an aid car. We responded to a homeless patient who had drank too much. The personnel provided what I would say one of the most outstanding patient assessments by an EMT that I had seen in a long time. Determined that the patient did not meet criteria to go to the hospital and called a sober living unit. Up pulls a vehicle with 2 personnel with Washington State EMT patch on their shoulder. And the patient was really compassionately cared for and was taken to a sober living area where he was given food and cared for and medically monitored for several hours before he was allowed to leave. Literally, my jaw hit the ground. I was like, wait, what are we doing? That's not allowed in California. That you cannot do that. But there's legislation right now in place that I think we're finally scratching the surface, and I think we're going to make some headway. Instead of, and I don't mean to make light of it, but instead of the concept of you call, we haul, which is really kind of an old term of, hey, you call, we're taking you to the hospital. It's really turning into you call, we navigate. And whether that's navigate to an urgent care center, to a sober center, to an emergency department, I think the future is right here. And in the next couple of years, we're going to start to see that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so thrilled, to be the fire chief at this point, because I think we're going to see some really innovative stuff that's going to come out in the next few years. So that was a very long response to your question, and I apologize. But at this point, we're so limited with what we can do, but the laws are changing, so I'm very hopeful.
Wonderful. That was an excellent response. I appreciate that detail. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chief, do you know if this report has been given to City Council and the mayor? I saw in the news, it looks like city sales tax and some other things are going to increase to start covering these costs. And, I find it deeply ironic that for all of us that are renting or don't have homes and, trying to make our way through this lovely city, now are pushed back even a little bit more because, our costs are going to continue to increase. So, and it's kind of a shame too, that over $500,000, that's like 8 jobs, maybe 9 or so for firefighters that could be working. I just wonder if maybe some of those efficiencies you were talking about could reduce the cost of this, and, because money has to come from somewhere, right? Like none of this stuff is free, and that's the point of your whole conversation. So it's just, so some of these larger picture things, right? It's just deeply ironic that, we're doing our best to help people and they absolutely need help. Like you said, if someone calls, someone should be there immediately. It's just, it's this cycle that you get caught in, and it's like, how do you dig yourself out of that? So I don't know, maybe that's more of a comment than a question, but thank you.
Well, in answer to the first part of your question, the commission asked for some information last month about approximate costs involved in responding to homeless calls. And so I got together with my staff and looked at the stats. Answer your question, it has not been given to City Council. This is something that my business manager and I worked on, and based on information that's been compiled over the last few years. But again, Commissioner Peck, it's really important to say that our firefighters are on duty. And so whether they're responding to this call or not, they're on duty. And it's important for our community to have that standing army. And but back to your point, I think we are, again, just starting to crest the hill with really looking at a more efficient system. Right now, we're throwing everything at each call. And I think in the future, with excellent emergency medical dispatch interrogation, and I hate to use the word call screening, but call navigation, I think we're going to start to see more efficiency in the system. And we're seeing it. Again, I used Seattle as an example, but some people may not know that Los Angeles City Fire Department is running 4 nurse practitioner units down in the city of Los Angeles to handle low acuity responses and to treat and release. There's also a sober ambulance that just responds to intoxicated patients and takes them to, customized locations. We're getting there in Santa Barbara. We're getting there. And I think you ask excellent questions. And with the efficiencies of a more modernized dispatch center, with the efficiencies of a new ambulance contract, I think we're going to be looking at exactly what you're asking over the next few years. So it's an excellent question. And all I can say is we're scratching the surface and we'll be talking about it a lot more in the next few years.
Chief Bales, you may have already answered this, and perhaps it wouldn't be allowable under the current system, but Chairman Stedman mentioned someone who had called 280 times. The current system wouldn't allow you to show that whether this person is a chronically ill person or a chronic caller or any of that type information. Is that true?
So again, I have to be very careful of not revealing too much information. And again, this is representative of other patients in our city. This is a complex case.
Okay.
Again, a person has to want help and want to have all of those services that we provide them. In this particular case, the person is resistant. They just want to be cared for, have their medical problem temporarily fixed, and be allowed to go on and live their life. There has been, and I'm proud to say and proud to see the coordination that's going on. There's a lot of people who do some really, really good work for this patient. And it's a marathon, not a sprint a lot of times. As you've likely heard when, talking with SB Act or CityNet, it's not a one and done. You don't go out and make contact with somebody the first time and build that trust and say, hey, this is what we're going to do for you the first time we show up. It may be 4, 5, 10, 20 contacts before somebody allows. And in this case, this is kind of at the other end of the spectrum. So I think the point I'd like to make is there's a lot of resources and very, very talented and smart people that are trying to help with this one patient. And we're going to do it. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for adding to that context, Chief. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Would you like me to continue to the next section?
Please.
Okay. So the next section I wanted to share with you is building upon last month. In the last couple of months, I came to you and talked about our fire stats data that we are accumulating. Fire Stats is a company that the city fire department has contracted with to be our source for culling through our data and really looking at what we do and how efficient we are at it. As I'm sure with any workplace, we can all understand that software is, we have 20 different passwords for 20 different software programs, and the fire department is no different than that. From what we use on our laptop computers to our mobile data computers in the fire engines to how we glean through our data. So I mentioned that image trend is one way that we pull data, and fire stats is another way that we pull data. So I shared with you last month, I shared with you a quarterly report, and I shared with you a January 2020 report. And I shared with you that the monthly reports concentrate on response times and quarterly reports concentrate on the types of calls that we're going to. So I'll very quickly just share with you where we're at with February. So I went through last month and I talked to you about call processing time, turnout time, travel time, and basically how long it takes from the second the 911 call is picked up until our fire engines have stopped rolling in front of the address. And our calls last month in January, about 60% of our calls were getting out within the desired 1 minute. And so the top table is January for your reference from last month. And the new data that I'll show you is call processing time for February. And you'll see that it's dropped just a little bit, a couple of percentage points. Now that's only 1 month, so I'm hesitant to draw any significant conclusions. But what I want to show you is is the overall response time. And we'll get to the end and I'll draw a couple of good conclusions. So a couple of percentage point drops is not significant. You'll see that the vast majority of our calls are really being interrogated in the 30 seconds to a minute or so. And that is really fast. If you realize what they have to get at, what data or information they have to get, including address, phone number, reporting party's name, a callback number. The last thing we want to do is have a 911 call disconnected and not be able to know where that cell phone caller is calling from. So they've got to get a callback number right away. That takes time. And they're doing a respectable job right now. Of course, we can all do better with everything. So that's why data is so important to us. So that's call processing time. Turnout time, we're looking a little bit better. In January, we were about 50%. About 50% of the time we're getting out the door, and that means wheels rolling, the door is up, wheels rolling out the station door in just under 50% of the time. And again, I mentioned last month, it's, fire stations are large facilities. Our two-story fire stations, it simply takes time to get from one part of the station to the fire engine. It would be nice to have our firefighters for 48 hours sitting in the fire engine waiting for a call, but we know that's not realistic. So, but for February, we're seeing a slight uptick in compliance, where our firefighters now at 51.3% are getting out the door within a minute. One of the things that's interesting, I'll digress for 1 second, is our locution station alerting system has a clock, a seconds clock, and it's right next to the apparatus door. And so when the call goes off in the station, it starts ticking off the seconds. And when they get to the apparatus, they'll see the seconds, 45, 46, 55, 60, and the seconds start rolling. And they've affectionately started calling that the clock of shame. And it gets a little bit of competition going. And it's good for the firefighters to see how quickly or how important it is as a community that we get them out the door. So we're seeing an uptick, and that's good. Our travel time. We want to travel to the scene in less than 4 minutes. We're looking a little bit better. Now, again, I'll hesitate to say that that's only 1 month's time, approximately 400 calls or so, but we're looking a little bit better. And people have asked, by the way, how do they get on scene in 0 seconds? What about what's going on over there? How do we have, a few calls where they're literally arriving in 0 seconds? We have people that walk into the fire station with medical calls. We have our fire engines that are traveling across town and come across a traffic accident in the middle of the street, or they pull up right behind a car that's on fire. So they literally get dispatched, go en route, and go on scene in the same second. And so that's why we see that number way down on the side. And you see 15, 30 seconds. There's some people that are very fortunate that a fire truck happened upon them, in their time of need. We'll look at total response, and this is where I'm feeling pretty good this month. We're starting to. Here's a 6% increase in our compliance of arriving in 6 minutes or 15 seconds or less. So here's the bottom line. Our dispatchers are interrogating the calls as quickly as possible. Our firefighters are getting out the door as quickly as possible. They're traveling with the utmost safety. We have to remember that our fire trucks weigh nearly 20 tons, and driving with the utmost care and professionalism is really important. If we get in an accident, we're definitely not going to get there, and we're definitely not going to help. So really what we're looking at, and as I've mentioned before, we're looking at sharpening up that dispatch time, sharpening up the turnout time, and getting our folks safely to a call. So that's the last slide I have for you, because it's just a monthly report, and hopefully next month we can look at some quarterly data and you'll start to see some trends of what we're responding to. Happy to take any questions.
We can't hear you, John.
Sorry about that. I have a quick question, Chief, going forward. Thank you, by the way. Are you going to give us a budget update?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. We're in the very stages, early stages of budget presentation.
Right.
And budget approval. As you know, it's a very long project.
Yep.
We are due to present to council on May 5th. I can tell you that due to the hard work of my command staff, we're very pleased that we've come up with the requested budget reductions, COVID reductions. And we've done that through some innovation. And at which time is appropriate, I'm happy to come back and share the budget with you. I'd probably bring my business manager with me just because, you know, he's much better with the numbers than I am, but I'm sure I could get us through it.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic to see the budget overview.
Okay.
Chair Stedman, being that budget advisement is under the purview of the commission, could we request that a budget presentation for both the fire department and the police department be available in April so that we can have we can provide support for the May council meeting?
Absolutely. Great suggestion. Why don't we just, well, once Chief concludes, we can motion that, Vice Chair.
Chairman Stedman and Commissioners, I'm complete with my report. Unless you have any questions for me, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
No questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thorough job once again, Chief. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your time. It's most appreciated.
Yeah, so Lizzie, let's just reopen 11 and you can make a motion.
I'd be happy to make a motion. I guess I'm curious if we need to make an emotion, or can we just request that the department chiefs provide a budget report?
Well, if you want to get it on the agenda, right? Let's get it on the agenda. So,
Okay, then I move to have the fire and police chiefs provide a budget presentation during the April meeting. Thank you.
and I second that motion. Okay, we have 2 seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right. It's unanimous. So we're agendizing that. Thanks for bringing that up, Lizzie. Okay, so I think we've,
Chair Stedman,
yes.
it's Carol. We do have Anna Marie. Anna Marie would like to make a public comment.
Okay, thanks, Carl.
I'll unmute you, Anna Marie. I think you're still muted, self-muted. There you go.
Thank you. Commissioners, I just wanted to make 2 comments. One is I had actually originally wanted to talk on item number 11 that was on the agenda, and we reopened item 10 and then we skipped it. So I just would still like to make a comment on that. But regarding this particular presentation, thank you so much, Chief, for getting all of this together. I think it was very eye-opening, and I really appreciate all the time and effort that you spent doing this. One thing that I did want to recommend from the Chief's presentation, he stated that there's current legislation in our legislator's office that they're actually looking at making some changes to how the fire department responds. And actually, I guess it's making sure that they don't have to transport people to a medical facility. And I'm just curious if this board wouldn't, upon the chief's recommendation, of course, write a letter in support of that legislation, and then also recommend that the city council do the same. I think it's really important that, you know, members of our public, as well as our commissions, get more active in terms of what's happening at the state level, because we're seeing a lot of, you know, a lot of issues in terms of housing where they want to take away local control. And in this case, they actually want to give us a little bit more control that we could probably see an impact in our budget and in how everything operates in the fire department. So that's my recommendation regarding a letter, and just thank you again for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do we have further public comment, Carol?
No further public comment, but I will alert if you haven't noticed that it is 6:20 tonight.
Yes, I can see that, definitely. All right, so we are now moving to item number 14, staff communications. Yes, Chief.
I don't believe I gave my report, but I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought that your report was was SB Act. I'm very sorry, Chief.
I'd be happy to live with that. I just did want the commission to know, we were asked 2 questions with regards to homeless costs.
Yep.
Our projection is that, or last year's experience was that roughly 17.4% of our calls were directly attributed to homelessness. And our total budgeted cost in this year's budget is just under $1 million for various aspects related to homelessness. I'm going to work with the liaison, Commissioner Peck, to develop a template. And I would just make one suggestion: if we're going to do budget presentations in April, that you might look at the agenda, because that will probably be the only 2 items you would have time for unless we extended the time. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And we, I think we realize that. So we definitely want to keep it on the agenda, and we'll try to keep it, slim on other matters. I don't think we have anything pressing next month, but we look forward to seeing. I mean, you're the 2 biggest departments in the city, right? So it would be nice to get some preliminary budget information from these departments. And again, I apologize, Chief Malecki, and I really thought that Barbara Anderson was the entire scope of your report tonight. But it's interesting that your 17% homeless cost, that's attributable to your overall structure is kind of similar to the fire departments, right?
And I believe it is. And just for clarity, that 17.4% referred to calls for service.
Right.
Percentage of calls for service, and then the budgeted cost is just under $1 million.
Got it. Okay.
I did want to say to the board, I haven't had a chance to meet everybody, and maybe we can do that next time. But I do regard it as a privilege to be here, and I look forward to working with the commission as well as Mr. Nelson in helping find the next police chief.
Yeah, and I think that Commissioner Peck did reiterate your top 3 strategic goals during his report, Chief. So, to assist with the best possible chief selection, to do an ongoing assessment of the department, and help navigate the current political waters, I think were your 3 top priorities. And I will mention to the commission that the chief is a former fire and police commissioner. He served back in 2014. So he has some affinity for our job, I'm sure.
I do. Thank you.
Can I just want to acknowledge and thank Chief Malenkian for taking on this leadership role during this transition. Chief Luno is pretty hard shoes to follow, so I thank you for taking this on. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Anything you need, it's bilateral, right? If you need anything from us, just call Max and he'll get right on. All right. Okay.
There's a nice ring to it. Call Max.
Call Max. Exactly. All right. I hopefully, is there any more public comment, Carol?
No.
Okay, then we can move on to staff communications. If anybody wants to provide any, maybe Lizzie on your committee, your community oversight committee formation. What are they calling that committee now, by the way?
The Community Formation Commission
So-
tasked with developing the oversight.
So it's just going to stay that title remains. Okay.
Yeah, it's a year-long commitment. We met last week for a few hours. We spent that time just introducing ourselves and going over a surprisingly enjoyable training on ethics training and the Brown Act. So if you haven't, if you need a refresher, I would encourage you to find that recorded link because it was actually quite enjoyable and fun. So that's really what we did. We're going to be meeting annually. Monthly. We may have subcommittee meetings between the month, but we're in the brand new beginning stages of this commission.
Thank you. Thank you for that update, and for the comment about the ethics training and the Brown Act training. So who facilitated that? The city attorney?
Yes, Ariel Colon.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was fun.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it is. He has an interesting, fun personality in those settings. So, all right. Okay. I think if there aren't any further staff communications,
Chair Stedman?
Yeah.
One further, on the training for the commission, we have spoken to Graciela Reynoso, the City of Santa Barbara Human Resources, and we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow with Commissioner Rodriguez, Sean Hill, Graciela Reynoso, and myself.
Perfect. Yes, you and Vice Chairman are organizing that for us, right? So.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and when you said Sean Hill, you mean from the police department, correct?
Yes, Lieutenant Sean Hill, yes.
Okay, perfect. I'll look forward to hearing more about that, at our next meeting, right in between the budget reports. So
Yes, we're excited to have something to report.
that'll be fantastic, and we're in capable hands with you helping us out there, Diane. So much appreciated.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other staff communications? All right. Okay, we'll take note of Carol's reminder of time. If there's a motion for adjournment, we'll take it right now.
I move to adjourn.
We have
Second, the vice chair.
Okay, and all those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
team.
you for your
Thank
service,
you.
guys.